This is a Talon and Penny by Kinda Kukukat. Happy birthday. Being a part of the Claw family was never an easy task. Talon had been aware of this fact before he even knew how to speak. A lifetime of suffering had taught him how to take the harder knocks, even it meant having the defense mechanism that is being severely immature at times. However, there was something that never failed to remind him of his unfortunate lot in life. The funny thing about the Claw family was that they hadn't always been villains. One thing that they had always been was severely unlucky. No, no day was this more evident than the birthday of a Claw family member. Injury was unavoidable, and most were just happy to still be alive by the end of the day. It was the constant frustration brought on by their awful fate that turned the family to villainy. Talon's birthday was just around the corner and he was dreading the coming days. He'd requested a 3-day leave from his uncle, who, despite knowing the exact reason, still decided not only to be unsympathetic but also difficult about the entire matter. The man kept calling his nephew weak despite the fact that when the evil overlord's birthday rolled around, he took an entire week off. Talon only wanted the day preceding, the day of, and the day after off. Day 1 to prepare, day 2 to suffer, day 3 to recover. Dr. Claw begrudgingly oblique. Wow. The first day was spent rigorously. Hours were spent reinforcing the steel walls of his bedroom, padding all surfaces within, and installing layer upon layer of locks to the entryway. Everything was hypoallergenic and flame retardant. A series of air filters, air tanks, backup tanks, and an encyclopedia's worth of plan Bs for every situation were installed. Special waste receptacles were carefully designed and created. The perfect balance of nutrients that would never perish were also stored within the room. It was an exhaustive day that had the Hispanic teen sweating profusely by the end. Stepping back, the evil genius admired his handiwork. The environment was flawless. It was practically impossible for anything to go wrong to go wrong in it. Okay, he muttered. I think this'll be enough to help me survive the day. Approaching the 10-foot thick, steel reinforced, hyper-padded door, the teen engaged a series of blocks of varying levels of complexity and reliance upon electricity. Wow, that's so deep. The sound of metal clicking filled the silence of the room. With a sigh, the boy genius headed to the solitary futon lying in the middle of his heavily padded floor. I probably didn't even need this, but it's too late to change my mind now. Flopping down on the tin mattress, Talon let his eyes flutter shut. You'll make it through this, he muttered as he fell into a deep, albeit worry sleep. Day 2 started the same way. It always did for Talon, with a terrifying nightmare that forced him to wake up screaming at 12:01 a.m., jolting upwards from his futon covered in sweat and a scream strangled in his throat. Even as his body tried to tell him he was terrified, the Hispanic teen's mind was at relative ease. He was so used to the haunting image that were reverberating in his subconscious. The consecutive deaths of his family members were nothing new. Instead, Talon chose to lie back down onto his futon and relax his body. Some of the muscles in his limbs were still spasming from the initial sudden movements. Forcing his breathing to slow down and stay steady, the evil genius let his mind drift about loosely. You okay? Thoughts flowed calmly like a stream, each gradually transforming into the next. The birthday boy pondered many things, his consciousness wandering from the comfort of his bedding to child labor overseas and eventually to a consideration of the nature of existence itself. He mentally charted schematics for new inventions he could make. Yet, more than anything else, he found his mind gravitating towards thoughts of a blonde girl. Ooh. It wasn't unusual for Penny to occupy his thoughts. The great amount of interaction between the two made it hard to not think of her. However, she did worm her way to the forefront of his mind even more so than should be expected. Despite his adolescence in the naturally resultant hormones, the thoughts rarely strayed into adult territory. Rather when thinking of his fellow genius, the henchman often pondered the extent of which their connection between the two could be stretched. Talon was hesitant. Talon was hesitant to use the word relationship when considering the mutual acknowledgement between he and the girl. In all fairness, he was aware that relationship didn't imply any romantic inclination according to the dictionary. In fact, the term didn't even limit to only those of positive inclination. Technically, the word relationship was entirely accurate to describe the, relationship between the geniuses. Yet, it still felt wrong to Talon. Instead, he wondered how far each one of them would venture to for the other. The bond between them, the rivalry. I love this. Wait. The bond between them, the rivalry, the attraction, the sympathy, all of it. How far did that take the two? It was an interesting psychological question. What was each worth to the other? They were two of a kind, unlike any other. What would one do to keep the only one that understood him or her around? Would they even go far as to risk their lives for one another? The boy genius would love to know the answer and yet feared that one day he might. To learn the solution to his problem would mean to risk ultimately at least one life. Talon himself could not determine the extent he would go to for her. The Hispanic teen could easily imagine himself reacting selfishly to save his own hide or risking his neck for her. However, he wouldn't truly know unless he was there in the situation himself. By the time his consciousness resurfaced, a few hours had passed. The clock he installed on the ceiling read 3:14 a.m. As though knowing the teen was looking, the clock burst into flames. Talon rolled his eyes and let the clock burn itself out. Once the device was nothing but a blackened crisp, the wall opened behind it and the ruined machine fell into the hole behind it. Seconds later, an identical, pristine clock emerged. Wow. The evil genius sighed as he accepted the fact that the disastrous luck was finally starting to kick in. In the midst of his sigh, the Hispanic teen began to choke on nothing at all, or perhaps his own saliva, rolling off the futon and onto the padded floor. Talon gasped up as he triggered the response to respiratory failure. All at once, the oxygen concentration of his room increased slightly while robotic arms reached down from the ceiling to administer CPR. 30 painful chest compression by metal hands followed by oxygen being forced into his windpipe. It was unbearably painful. By the end of it, he had huge dark bruises in the center of his chest that ached every time he moved his core muscles. "Oh yeah," he muttered sarcastically as he laid spread eagle out on the floor. "This is going to be so much fun." 6 hours in, and Talon had managed to survive after multiple spontaneous combustions, a number of sudden carbon monoxide leaks, every other muscle in his body cramping in unison for what he supposed was shit and giggles, and even a surprise brain aneurysm. Grabbing at his aching throat, the teen let out a weak cough, followed by a wheeze. Man, oh man, did he love his birthday? A soft whistling could be heard from outside his room. As it grew in volume, Talon let out a groan and rolled onto his stomach to brace for impact. Once the sound grew deafening, a quick rip from the room, a quick rip over the room as violent explosion sounded from beyond the walls. Whatever crashed into him was now nothing but a ball of fire and debris on the other side of his steel walls. He hoped it was an unmanned drone. It probably wasn't. No, it definitely wasn't. Pain screams could be faintly from the other side. Curling into the fetal position, and the evil genius clamped his hands over his ears and squeezed his eyes shut. He just had to wait. This hell would end eventually. Note to self, soundproof the walls next year. I'm so wanting to read the part 2 already. Time ticked by slowly. It's sadistically ambled, hobbling and staggering mockingly, passing him by leisurely with spiteful grin, taunting him, teasing him. Talon felt nauseous. Actually, he felt incredibly nauseous. Scrambling to the far corner of his room, the teen hit a button nestled within the padding on his walls. A hatch opened up in front of him, which he proceeded to hurl the contents of his stomach into. Why was he reaching? Who knows? It could be a hormone imbalance, something he ate, the gods cursing his name, anything really. Falling backwards onto his back and leaving his limbs askew, making him look like a star. The evil genius sighed painfully as he listened to the whirring of the hatch closing. The bile burned his mouth and throat while the pungent scent scalded his nose. Puking was the opposite of fun, but at least he no longer felt nauseous. The little optimism that he could afford to have was all that kept him from morphing from a supervillain into a serial killer. Talon was scared to look at the clock, terrified to find that only minutes had passed, that his day of torment would continue on even longer, infinitely so. With a shuddering breath, the Hispanic boy reached a glance at the clock. 6:24 a.m. It would never end. He hummed an entire symphony, Beethoven's Symphony Number 3 to be exact 56 minutes long, and scored for 2 flutes, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets in B flat, 2 bassoons, 3 horns, the first in E flat, C and F, the second in E flat and C, and the third in E flat. 2 trumpets in E flat and C, timpani in E flat and B flat in the first, third, and fourth movements, and in C and G in the second movement, and strings. Talon wasn't much of a music nut. Symphony Number 3 was the only one he knew so well as to hum the entirely. It was mostly because of the length. Humming it was an excellent way to pass the time. It ensured that he would get 56 minutes of his It ensured that he would get 56 minutes of his life out of the gray. Incredibly convenient, unlike Greg's in the hole of the mountain game, which barely lasted 3 minutes, while bad stuff had certainly happened during those During those 56 minutes, focusing on the symphony made it easier to ignore. That was why he began to hum the exact same symphony again. One day, Talon would build a time machine to thank good old Ludwig for the favor he'd done him. With a yawn, the teen rolled onto his side. He felt his shoulder slip out of its socket just as he began to put pressure on it, and let out a tired groan. Sitting up, he swiveled his dislocated arm back into the place before popping it right back into its socket. What the fuck? The muscle around it angrily screamed at the genius, but he refused to let the pain bother him. Laying back down on his back, Talon stared at the clock in the ceiling before rolling onto his other side, just like the other shoulder was out of its socket as the teen let out a frustrated moan and sat up to correct his dislocated shoulder. Blank stares bounced up the padded pristine white walls on all sides of him. He used every trick in the book to pass the time. He'd recited the entire dictionary aloud, even coding thesaurus. Ultimately, the evil genius had sacrificed his state of mind short-term in exchange for survival in the long run. The day was reaching late afternoon and Talon was still alive. Only a few more hours to go and he'd be on the tail end of this hell. How the fuck do you recite the whole dictionary? I wish I could do that. Wandering aimlessly, much like a nomadic man would, with little wonder as nothing becomes new because you've seen it all before, his mind returned to Penny. His complement, his character flaw, his ideal mate. It was easy to assign such labels to her, but what were her labels for him? Personal annoyance was likely one. Talon liked to think that infuriating skilled was another. Infuriatingly skilled was another. There was one label he knew she filled him under, one she'd never admit, but it was plain as day on her face. Pitiful. The blonde pitied the evil teen. Naturally, this pissed him off to no end. Was he deserving of pity? Probably, but that didn't mean he needed it. The Hispanic boy certainly didn't want it. The worst part was that he had no idea how to make her stop. How can he make it so that she won't pity him? It seemed impossible. The cards were stacked against him. His home life, his personality disorder, his appearance, his pride. There was so little he could do to change her opinion of him that Talon gave up altogether. Let Penny think what she wanted to. The genius couldn't change her mind regardless of how much he wanted to. Recalling her pity made him feel angry as he curled into his side to glare at the potted walls. He needed no pity. The teen could take care of himself. Just look at how he managed to survive the onslaught of his birthday. The birthday boy managed something akin to sleep, or rather a nap, in which he'd lose consciousness for maybe 3 minutes before being startled to awake by some catastrophe. The limbo of conscious and unconscious lasted a few hours before Talon woke fully to the sound of banging on his door. "Talon," growled the heavy voice of Dr. Claw. "Wake up!" "What?" the tortured boy shouted, feeling briefly like a regular teenager from the annoyance flooded in his voice. "You're going on a mission first thing tomorrow." Okay. "You're going on a mission first thing tomorrow," called the evil mastermind from the other side. "What?" Talon shrieked incredulously. "I said..." "I know what you said!" the evil genius shouted as he clambered to his feet. "And I am saying no fucking way! You will go out or I pull you out or whatever college it is you're in it right now." Talon slammed his fist against his bedroom door. Do you have any idea how long I have been studying to graduate from his law school? I am 3 weeks away and you want to pull me out? You're a minor. Legally, I control your fate. So do as I say." Ang hirap. his uncle yelled while walking away. The moment I can, I'm in. The moment I can, I'm emancipating myself! The teen yelled despite knowing his guardian was no longer listening. You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. It's so hard. He mumbled while falling back against his padded floor. Ang sakit siya po. It's so, I guess I'm having bad. Oh my god! I still haven't found my berries, but I found this. Okay, let's go. Staring up at the clock above his head, the boy counted the minutes until midnight. He was tired, severely tired, but he knew he couldn't get a decent rest until he made into it. Okay. Severely tired, but he knew he couldn't get a decent rest until he'd made it into tomorrow. The moment the digital display read 12 a.m., the Hispanic teen let out a sigh as his burning eyelids fell shut. There was still some residual bad luck that would haunt him tomorrow, but the evil genius chose not to focus on that in favor of congratulating himself for surviving the day. He didn't know if he'd be able to say the same thing at the end of this new day, so he might as well say it now. Sleep first, worry later. He woke up. He awoke feeling incredibly sore. The multiple injuries and overwhelming amount of dislocation made every muscle in his made every muscle in the teen's body ache at even the thought of moving. A note laid at the foot of his door. The pale fibers blending in amongst the stark white of the padding covering his floor. Scrawled on it is I'm so sorry if you're listening to this. Please. I just need to sigh. It's so hard to breathe. Where am I? Scrawled on it in his uncle's abysmal handwriting was the information on his mission that day. Mad Intel apparently located a sunken ship with a good amount of treasure on it to support their evil schemes for many, many years. It was Talon's job to secure the treasure. Naturally, as Mad knew about it, HQ knew too, since no Mad Intel was secure, no matter how many firewalls the team installed or how many workers he interrogated. The leak was somehow untraceable. So now an incredibly impaired Talon was tasked with doing his usual job, which typically needed a team of experts to accomplish in the first place. The teen managed to do it by himself most of the time, unless of course Gadget was involved, but as he was now, he wouldn't be able to do much of anything except possibly die. There was a distinct likelihood that could be the end result of this. Smugly, the boy genius wondered where his uncle would be without him. What could the so-called mastermind accomplish without the core cog in the mad machine that Talon was? The evil genius noted that his narcissism was an excellent defense against fear of impending suffering and possible doom. Although rather than afraid, he just felt pissed off. Grumbling as he pushed himself off the futon, the henchman wondered if he should actually put away effort into the mission rather than obtaining the treasure. It seemed as though the focus of his mission would be survival. Survival. While he'd rather that he were the master of his own fate, Talon seriously doubted he had so much as a chance to succeed. Okay. The teen shrugged out of his special and humorously named birthday suit made of hypoallergenic indestructible fibers and changed into his mission gear. Minutes later, he was on the launch pad running triple diagnostic checks on his rocket boots. The absolute last thing he needed was for his main mode of transportation to malfunction. With an all clear from the system, the evil genius took off into the sky, making sure his helmet for long trips was properly supplying oxygen. Talon let himself enjoy the journey. The quiet, long hours he spent traversing the skies were his favorite time. Suspended in the air, alone but free to be himself, it was the teen's happy place. A nearby flock of birds regarded him with mild interest before continuing on. Tilting his feet, the evil genius let himself be rocketed up through the cloud layer. Murky whiteness clouded his vision until he burst through into a clear patch above. A breathtaking view of the fluffy white blanket coated in sunlight spanning for miles upon miles filled his mind. He let a single conscious thought squeeze itself to the forefront of his brain. It was a view worth dying for. With the last thought, the boy let out a yell that ripped through his throat like tissue paper and deactivated the thrusters in his shoes. Going into freefall, Talon marveled at the sound and sensation of wind whipping past him. By the time he reached terminal velocity, the Hispanic couldn't contain the grin that stretched across his face. This, without a doubt, was his chosen way to go. The gentle ping that sounded from his helmet alerted the henchman to his proximity to the destination. Twisting his body to redirect his fall, the boy reignited his rocket boots so he could fly along the ocean surface. A screen inside his visor showed the teen the point at which he needed to dive. Sticking his hands out and pointing his fingers to the sea, Talon let the water encase him. He quickly changed the thrusters to hydroelectric power using a ventilation system to filter air in and out of his boots to propel him through the water. Beethoven. The water pressed his polymer mission outfit tight against his skin, reminding the boy of the skin-tight uniforms of the mad henchmen. Honestly, they looked ridiculous. Talon simply couldn't understand why in the world his uncle thought a bunch of grown men squished into latex suits seemed threatening. It was like being attacked by a large colorful sausage. What the fuck? The teen's thoughts were interrupted by a sight of a downed ship coming into his line of sight. He just needed to get it over with quickly, and then he could move on with his life. A brief smile slipped onto the genius' lips as he acknowledged what was to come. Being at the wreckage meant that the mission was officially commencing. Mission start meant his inevitable battle with his rival was about to begin. Time spent with her was only second on time. What? Wait. I'm happy. A brief smile slipped onto the genius' lips as he acknowledged what was to come. Being at the wreckage meant that the mission was officially commencing. Mission start meant when his inevitable battle with his rival was about to begin, and the time spent with her was only second to the time spent flying. Penny was probably one of his favorite people, not just because she was attractive, although that certainly did help, but because she really underestimated him. Sure, it was frustrating that she labeled him blatantly without understanding the boy, like everyone else did, but the teen knew she suffered from a similar fate to his own. She was constantly underestimated and underrecognized. They sympathized with one another as they fought in the name of someone else. The boy genius mind couldn't help but drift to the thought of nights under the okay, ow, ow. The boy genius mind couldn't help but drift to the thoughts of nights under different feudal lords that were warring for territory. A far more interesting version of Romeo and Juliet. Maybe he was romantic. Talon couldn't. Talon continued to ponder the medieval alternate world as he set small devices almost like charges along the rim of the boat. I can't breathe. I'm so sorry. Rim of the boat. A quick button pressed on the device on his wrist, and his small gadgets lit up with electricity as a hydrophobic bubble formed around the wreck. He'd really outdone himself that time around, stepping lightly into the air bubble he'd made. The evil teen leisurely made his way into the bow from a gaping hole in the side of the ship. It didn't take him long to find the treasure, which turned out to be a bunch of limited edition Beanie Babies that had been sealed in air. What? That had been sealed in airtight containers which Matt could sell on eBay for thousands. Frowning thoughtfully, the Hispanic teen pondered something for a moment before nodding to himself and dropping a small metal ball he'd pulled from his pocket into the crate, filled to the brim with exclusive collectibles. Hold it right there! Hold it right there! Ah! Mayan. It's so hard to voice Penny with voice of Talon. Okay. Hold it right there! A feminine voice suddenly called out from behind the henchman. What? Where did she even? Mentally shrugging, the boy genius decided he didn't actually care. Hey, pretty Penny. Talon grinned at how calm he sounded but figured that Penny would interpret his expression as mug. What are you doing here so soon? I was planning to finish fixing up my little project here before inviting you on a sailing trip. She didn't know how to respond. As usual, her comeback skills were just incredibly below par, and he found it adorable how she struggled to respond to his typical enemy banter. I don't care. Step away from the Beanie Babies. The Hispanic teen interrupted suddenly. Yes, the Beanie. Wait, Beanie Baby? Visit, hirap. The Beanie Babies? The Hispanic teen interrupted suddenly. Yes, the Beanie. Wait, Beanie Babies? The blonde frowned as she leaned to the side to peer around Talon's form into the crate. Seriously, what does Mad want with Beanie Babies? Other people want them, Talon replied, disdainful of the small plushies, crossing his arms as he turned around to regard them. The henchman frowned. I don't know why, but other people want them so we can sell them. Oh. The HQ agent stared at the crate silently a moment before turning back to her arch rival. This seems kind of stupid now that I know we're fighting over a bunch of tiny bears in cheap outfit, but a mission is a mission, so let's do this. She settled back into a fighting stance and waited for the boy to do the same. Talon growled as he let his aching body slide into a similar stance. He wasn't going to win this one. As Penny went in for a high kick aimed at his jaw, the Hispanic teen shifted just barely out of the way before throwing a right countered aim at her cheek. He cursed as his elbow suddenly popped out of his socket, causing his forearm to shift entirely away from his intended target. "You got to be kidding me," the boy muttered. His punch left him wide open, and a quick knee to his side sent him flying into the splintered, rotting wood under his feet. The evil genius hurriedly tried to reset his arm, but Penny wasted no time in preparing to drop kick him. Instead, the Hispanic forsook his elbow in favor of rolling out of the way of the heavy blow aimed at him. The joint only became more irritated as he applied pressure to it during his escape. He was quickly losing any hope of controlling his dominant arm. With a growl, the henchman executed a quick sweep quick to incapacitate his opponent to buy himself time. Penny hit the ground with a thud as Talon scrambled away to increase the distance. Setting his arm hurt like hell, but he was so sore it wasn't all the prominent of the pain. By the time the boy finished fixing his arm, his nemesis was already back on her feet. The henchman was going to lose. "So," he suddenly piped up, causing the blonde to pause her movement towards him. "I know our usual routine is the martial arts fight with the kicking and punching and with whatnot, but what do you say we mix him up? How's a karaoke contest to determine the winner sound?" Penny frowned and resumed approaching her still down foe. "You're kidding, right?" The girl suddenly shifted to a run and launched a flying kick at the boy, who quickly rolled out of the way. A flurry of attacks came at him, and the injured teen could only dodge the hits. The HQ agent felt herself well up with pride at how thoroughly she was dominating in the fight. It had to be because of the new training program she started, since the rival, who was normally at least one step ahead of her, was suddenly struggling to match her pace. A sudden beep from her watch reminded the girl genius that her main priority was not the fight, but to obtain the Beanie Babies. She feinted a roundhouse kick to increase their distance before leaping backwards to grab the crate with the blue tractor beam on her portable holo computer. Okay, I rested my voice, okay. She feinted a roundhouse kick to increase their distance before leaping backwards to grab the crate with the blue tractor beam on her portable holo computer. With a devious grin, Penny mimicked Talon's mock salute before escaping the wreckage and jumping into her one-person submarine park at the edge of the bubble. Common sense told her that he would chase after her, in which case he'd just have to outrace him and she'd complete the mission. The blonde planned to hit him with a special water-resistant ooze that blocked his field of vision. So she purposely lagged behind so he'd get close enough for her to hit him. Yet the henchman never bothered to come rushing out of the hole. Frowning curiously, the HQ agent stayed within sight range of the craft. Talon sighed as he rubbed the back of his neck and laid back against the wooden floorboards. At least it was over with. Honestly, he couldn't move anymore. Exhaustion had taken its toll on his body, and the teen was content to rest his broken body in the broken ship until he had enough energy to make the trip home. A loud sparking noise caught his attention, and the evil genius wished he had enough spirit left to at least get out an annoyed groan. Residual bad luck was going to do him in. Penny watched in surprise as one of Talon's hydrophobic devices seems to short out and a huge mass of water suddenly came crashing down on the wreckage. "I can't breathe peacefully," I'm stuttering. I'm so sorry if you're listening to this. But you have to listen to this till the end because there is part 2. Okay? There is part 2 which is full of Talani. I'm just saying. Please. Okay. The force was enough for the boat to be destroyed, and the girl's field of view was temporarily obscured by debris and small air bubbles exploding from the source. She waited for her rival's form to rocket out on his signature jet boots and waited and waited. Eventually, the bubbles cleared out of the way, and the agent found herself staring in shock at the motionless body that was suspended in the water a couple feet off the bottom of the ocean. What's that? What's that? She rocketed her mini-sub forward to get a closer look. Sure enough, it was very pale-looking Talon floating in the ocean. Adrenaline caused her to slam a fist down and dangerously hard on the tractor beam of the sub to draw the tin into her small cargo bay. I'm so sorry. I keep saying sorry, even though it was just me who is listening. The blonde scrambled from her feet to the hatch to meet him once his body was pulled inside. Crouching next to his body in the very limited space, the girl genius panicked as she realized he was not breathing. She needed to do emergency CPR and then immediately get him to the nearest HU medical center. Oh shit! You're gonna do CPR, baby! Recalling health class from the HU Training Institute, Penny placed the heels of her palms in the soft spot just below Talon's ribs. All her arm muscles tense as she did 30 painfully. I failed the test. Penny knows it perfect. That's so sweet. I find it sweet. All her arms muscles tense as she did 30 painfully hard chest compressions before shifting to hover over Talon's head. Tilting his head up slightly and pinching his nose, the agent pushed away any fluttery teenage thoughts about lip contact. Recording. Oh my god! No! Okay. Focus. Oh my god! Yes! No, it's not kiss. It's CPR, baby. Okay. Tilting his head up slightly and pinching his nose, the agent pushed away any fluttery teenage thoughts about lip contact and tightly filled her mouth around his. 3 long breaths later, the girl was back to bruising the crap out of his stomach. Just as she was about to return to his lips, a violent coughing caused her to pull back. Talon? Penny tried to speak softly, but her voice came out as an urgent demanding. Can you hear me? Urgent and demanding. Can you hear me? Hacking loudly and rolling onto his side, the henchman could probably hear her. I'm taking you to the nearest medical facilities. Hang on! She paused as she ducked through hatch to the control room. Don't die! Oh shit. Don't die. The blonde's command was absolute. One moment, the agent was hurtling through the sea at max speed, and the next she was standing in front of the holoscreen displaying her nemesis vitals. The urgency made the trip pass by with a blur, and only now that she saw all the damage to his body was she snapping out of her stupor. Talon's body was in incredibly bad shape, but this much damage couldn't even Don't die. Talon's body was in incredibly bad shape, but this much damage couldn't have been caused by one accident alone. Penny was furious, and she didn't understand why. How bad he getting so hurt? Had he been fighting other people before his fight with her? Why was he fighting other people? He should only ever need to fight with her. She was the HQ agent always. She was the She was the HQ agent that always interfered with his plans. She was his rival. He was stable enough to answer questions now that was exactly what she would make him do. What the hell? The blonde practically shouted angrily as she barged into the sterilized chamber that one could consider his room. Were you doing this to get this insanely injured? Talon winced at her tone. It was cute that she was worried about him, but it seemed like she might just injured him more if he said the wrong thing. Would you believe me if I said I was having a lazy day? The hollow screen that appeared once she made it to this bedside was an unfortunate victim as she punched through the fragile material that held it in place. As shards of glowing light scattered to the floor, the HQ agent turned her glare to the patient. What kind of lazy day causes enough stress to all your major joints that it looks like hirap wisit. What kind of lazy day causes enough stress to all your major joints that it looks like each one was dislocated 50 fucking times in one day? Okay, we're gonna hear Penny curse. What kind of lazy day causes enough stress to all your major joints that it looks like one was dislocated 50 fucking times in one day? Smiling tightly, the henchman weakly held up his hands in surrender. My kind of lazy day? His answer sounded more like a question than he would have liked, and apparently it sounded too much like a question to her as well. I swear until you tell me how you got injured so badly, I'll just add new injuries to you every day so you can leave the hospital. Her threat was entirely serious as she raised an angry fist next to her head. Yikes! Talon muttered as he scooted back slightly only to feel his body screech in protest. Can I tell you in a little bit after you've calmed down? Penny frowned but lowered her fist nonetheless as though to prove she was calm enough to hear his answer now. The boy genius wasn't so sure. You'll be okay. Anyway, he continued, chuckling loosely. Thanks for saving me. I really thought it'd beat the bullet this time around. Somehow, this seemed to trigger a rush of emotions in Penny. How can you laugh at me? How can you laugh at a time like this? Ay, mali. Oh my God, mali. Ulit. Pwede ulitin? Because I wanted to. Okay. Ano na lang tayo, no? Ba yun? Puro dialogues. Para... What the hell? The blonde part... I said dialogues. Pero okay na. Okay. Ulitin natin. What the hell? The blonde practically shouted angrily as she barged into the sterilized chamber that one could consider his room. Were you doing this to get this insanely injured? Talon winced at her tone. It was cute that she was worried about him, but it seemed like she might just injured him more if he said the wrong thing. Would you believe me if I said I was having a lazy day? The hollow screen that appeared once she made it to his bedside was an unfortunate victim as she punched through the fragile material that held it up that held it in place as the shard of glowing light scattered to the floor. The HQ agent turned her glare to the patient. What kind of lazy day causes enough stress to all your major joints that it looks like each one was dislocated 50 fucking times in one day? Smiling tightly, the henchman weakly held up his arms in surrender. My kind of lazy day? His answer sounded more like a question than he would like, and apparently it sounded too much like a question to her as well. I swear until you tell me how you got injured so badly, I just add new injuries to you every day so you can leave the hospital! Her threat was entirely serious as she realized an angry fist next to her head. Yikes! Talon muttered as he scooted back slightly only to feel his body screech in protest. Can I tell you in a little bit after you calm down? Penny frowned but lowered her fist nonetheless as thought to prove she was calm enough to hear his answer now. The boy genius wasn't so sure. Anyway, he continued, chuckling loosely, thanks for saving me. I really thought I'd beat the bullet this time around. Somehow, this seemed to trigger a rush of emotions in Penny. How can you laugh at a time like this? She asked in frustration as her fists bailed at her sides. The blonde ducked her head down to hide the tears. You almost died! You're heavily injured! You've been heavily injured since even before we fought on the ship, and you said absolutely nothing about it the whole time! The Hispanic teen really wanted to correct her, since technically asking if they could have done a karaoke battle instead technically counted as saying something, but he figured out he'd live longer if he kept his mouth shut. How can you not feel terrified? Well, Penny was scared to death of him dying. It horrified her to think about how he could have just vanished from her life. You almost died, Talon! The evil genius was shocked by how much emotion his rival was feeling. He was literally shaking for her to care about him so much. The least he could do was offer the truth in return. Well, Talon paused so as to carefully choose his words. I suppose I'm just used to being this close to death. The HQ agent's head snapped up to watch her nemesis as he seemed to ponder what he was about to say. Close. He liked his dry lips as his caramel eyes shifted to bore into her blue ones. Tend not to live long. It's not health, or rather it isn't always health. How do I put this? The amber orbs dropped down to the ground to consider something for a second before returning to her gaze. You know, I'm a man of science at heart. If it can be explained with a scientific method, I won't believe it. Be it God, karma, leprechauns, or otherwise. However, I find myself frequently struggling with one exception to that rule as it is the only plausible way to comprehend my family's history. Please, Penny interrupted dryly. Be more vague. Talon frowned and tried to cross his arms across his chest, tempted to forget his story altogether. However, the pained strain to get his arms into that position reminded him he owed her his life, and the truth was what she demanded in return. Look, the boy said bluntly, and watched as the girl raised her eyebrows skeptically. My family has always seemed to be possessed by the most horrible of luck one can simply possess. The face Penny made was starting to piss him off. No, I know it sounds ridiculous, but I'm serious. Just think about everything you know about me and our encounters. Have at any given time I ever seemed lucky to you? My throat ached. Penny indulged him, thinking for a moment before realizing that he was, in fact, the unluckiest person she knew, assuming that the concept of luck was valid to begin with. Admittedly, no. Admittedly, no. Well, the evil genius continued, my entire family is like that. Just one considered my uncle, and you'll understand. For whatever reason, as long as the Claw family has been around, we've been haunted by exceptionally bad luck. For whatever reason, the unluckiness. The boy paused to consider something. If that isn't a word, I'll help Webster and make it one, so don't say anything. The unluckiness seems to reach its peak during our birthdays, and somehow he almost felt embarrassed revealing this of all things to her. Yesterday was mine. The HQ agent remained silent, so the henchman continued. I spent the day I spent the entire day locked in a room that I made so as to survive. Birthday preparations are kind of insane. During those 24 hours, joint would dislocate randomly. I choke on nothing, have the odd seizure, spontaneous combustions would occur around me. It's just barrels of fun. It's just barrels of fun. Barrels of fun. Thinking back to yesterday, the teen recalled his pondering over the relationship between Penny and himself. She'd saved him. She'd angrily inquired as to why he was so injured. She'd cared so much about his health, and she even listened to his outlandish truth. Making it out alive is usually a pretty big deal. I was supposed to get today to recuperate, but my uncle decided he needed to have those beanie babies, so I went on the mission. What did he mean to her? And what did she seem mean? And what did she mean to him? Evidently, they were both extremely attached to one another. Was it just really sympathy that bonded them two? Before Talon could search out the answer in his... Before Talon! Oh! I have to stop. Before Talon could search out the answer in her crystalline blue eyes any longer, Penny spun on her heels and exposed her back to him. I'm supposed to believe that? Her voice was scornful, but it was easy to tell her heart wasn't in it. Just hurry up and get healed and leave. You're wasting HQ funds. The blonde marched out of the chamber and listened as the door slid shut behind her. As soon as she was out of his range, The blonde marched out of the chamber and listened as the door slid shut behind her. As soon as she was out of his range, outside, she opened her holo computer and scrolled through the calendar. March 3rd, huh? The HQ agent muttered silently to herself as she began to walk down the hall. I wonder what I can get him as a belated present. Talon stared at the thick metal door that just closed him off the closest thing he had to do a friend. Glancing down at his wrist controller that sat on the side table, the boy let a small grin on his face. Oh, tapping a hidden button along the rim, the teen let out a sigh. A small screen flickered to life to show the view from a camera in the metal ball he dropped in the crate of treasure. As the spear oozed a corrosive acid that destroyed the rare merchandise. Childish it may be, but he really couldn't let HQ get a boost in funding even as they treated him, and he didn't like losing. I love this very much. Okay, this is... I don't know. I'm so sorry. So I finished... Yes! It's 1 hour! Exact 1 hour of me. Birthday surprise. Okay, so this is the part 1 of birthday. And the second one is birthday surprise. So I'm gonna say that I'm gonna end this now, and tomorrow, February 21, is gonna be birthday surprise, I think. This is February 20 today, and I'm still not doing anything because I feel really empty. So I gotta end this record right now, and my throat hurts like hell because of me voicing Penny saying fuck. I love that part. What the fuck? Oh, I love to hear Penny saying fuck. 50 fucking. Okay, I'm gonna end this now. So yeah, birthday. This is birthday. Okay, bye.